So that's just, yeah, let's not make our treasurer work harder. That's fine. Okay. I also want to note that there are t-shirts for sale in the back. Anything else for sale? We have any gloves or anything? So yeah, so like if you want to get a mug like this one, where we hired local artist Kim Heiza to decorate, that's the same as on the mug that's on the t-shirt. It's a bargain. Or the mug's $15 and the t-shirts are 20, 25. Still, it's a good deal. All right. The board of directors, we are accepting nominations for this year's renewal of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Award. We do ask, it'll be given to the person or entity which has been outstanding in native plant conservation in Dade and or Monroe counties. Please write a few paragraphs in support of your nomination and submit to the chapter leadership using an email, dadefnps@gmail. We will need that by Monday. So, because we're meeting as a board on Wednesday and people will need to review nominations. The board selects the winner. And the winner will be presented at our annual members meeting in May. And speaking of our annual members meeting in May, that's also our elections. And the board decided that Karina is the chair of the nominations committee. So we will have at least one new board member because Brian will be pushed out of his position as past president by me, as I will be past president. So there will be at least one director at large position. But contact Karina using the same email, dadefnps@gmail.com, if you think that you have what it takes to be a leader. I mean, some of the expectations were like maybe being a committee chair or something like that, where you contribute to the organization, not just as a board member, but as an active board member. We have a field trip this Saturday to Nixon Smiley Park, which is all fenced in, so it's a good opportunity to visit. I'll be leading the field trip, and Scott will be there because we're going to be discussing and have a little bit of a weeding at the end of the field trip if it's good weather. Here it might rain on Saturday. So, but it's still worthwhile to visit. It's field trips usually for members. And if you're a member, you get the newsletter. So pay attention to the instructions in the newsletter because we're not going to park at the preserve. We're going to park at a nearby Publix and shuttle it because there's no real parking. Smiley's a Pine Rockland. It's at least 100 acres, I think. And it's also a repository for rescued gopher tortoises. So they've been dumping gopher tortoises there. And but it's a real nice Pine Rockland with some ecototal components of Marl Prairie. It's located near what I know as Tamiami Airport, which is now the Miami Executive Airport in West Kendall. I don't think it's one of it goes back to the 70s. The addition was acquired in the 90s, but I think Campo B is perhaps one of our oldest, either that or Matheson. Those are pretty old. Oh yeah, on March 21st is Native Plant Day. So that's next month. And it'll be held at Amelia Earhart Park. I will mention you see these postcards, grab some more in the back to share with your friends or display at church or at Starbucks or wherever you frequent. And Danielle is going to come and ask for help.
Yes, you see, now everybody, big thank you to Karina for making these beautiful flyers. With a photo of from our board member, Carmen Ferraro. So it's really homegrown stuff here. Yes, please take some of them in the back, share with neighbors, put in their mailbox, and hang them up at Publix. maybe some at the school, yeah, just wherever. There is an electronic version of this. You can get that off of our social media, or you just email me, or you email the day chapter email, and we'll get that to you if you just want to share it by email. But there is a specifically made electronic version of this to distribute if you prefer that. But please help us advertise, share this. You know it's up north, and as I said last time, I get this, oh no, up north, too far away. You can check for yourself. You get on the Palmetto down here on the Palmetto Expressway. There is no traffic on Saturday morning. It's going to take you 30 minutes or less to the park once you're on the Palmetto, okay? So this is for most of us closer than going to Castle Hammock last year. Okay? Super easy to get to. Please, of course, yourself show up. Bring everybody along, friends, family, everybody. And don't just show up to enjoy, but please come volunteer.
All right, so yeah, so Daniela's passing around the thank you, Daniela. If anyone has any questions for her. Is there anything specific missing that you need help on, Daniela?
No, but I just really need people to read this and follow what's in there if they want to donate plants or other things. We'd like to make it a bit more organized this year than in the past. So I need your help to approach us way before the event. Ideally, especially if you grow plants for the event.
Okay, so if you plan on donating plants, contact Daniela. And her contact info is on web or in the newsletter. All right. As I mentioned earlier, March 24th, just after Native Plant Day, Melissa Fernandez, our executive director, who's a Miami native, is going to give a speech. She's also coming to Native Plant Day, so you can meet her there also. I already mentioned our annual members meeting, and we do need volunteers and other things that we do. Harley, do you need help on any of your outreach activities?
Yes, I'm going to talk to So we currently have a event on Earth Day, or towards the week of Earth Day. So if anyone's interested, you can contact me. It's harley.gera@gmail.com. We're primarily trying to do something during the week, so if you're interested, please contact.
So Earth Day's in April, and if you want to help on one of the outreach events, you contact them at harleygera@gmail.com. Okay. harleymgera@gmail.com. And I think Karita was also talking maybe some social media help. So if you're savvy with social media, we're always looking for assistance on our Instagram and on our X account and Facebook. So Karina's in the back corner there. You can contact her or come up to her at the end of the meeting and ask how you might be able to help if you have nice photos of things, or if you're attending something for FPS. We like to share that with the world. So, okay. And Karina is also the chair, in addition to being vice president and future president, she's the chair of the communications committee. And obviously the refreshment committee. She's an overachiever, yes. Thank goodness for us. I do want to point out also Ricky Bonema, who's our chapter rep. They're doing big things in the state, which again we'll hear about next month. And I already mentioned that the dues are going to go up. So, are there any other announcements? All right, we'll do the raffle. well, the descriptions. So I don't know the story of this box. That's someone else's plan. So we have some books that are pretty cool. I think out of print things with some plant ID books. Not all are native, but they're great. I mean, golden guides are great. Some of these are hard to acquire. So these are great things to get. Ooh, this is a spiders, and it looks like this one by G on it. Some of you might remember him. Okay, here we have some. No, we'll talk plants. So we have one of our native stoppers, and this is a nice small tree. You can your yard. It these white flowers that are very fragrant. They emit kind of a stinky odor. Will grow very well in shade, or north side of a house, or a wall, or a fence. It doesn't mind being a little shady. It won't grow as fast, but it'll still grow pretty well. Pretty tough plant. These galls on them, but it's not going to kill the plant. And it's a native stopper, which belongs in our a native tick seed. This is Leavenworthia. It's a wildflower. It's an annual. It has real pretty yellow flowers. It's our state wildflower. And this is found in kind of wettish pinelands and in prairies near pinelands. It is in the Everglades. It's in the big cypress. And it does attract lots of pollinators, family of sunflowers. It's in the Asteraceae. That's a great plant family to attract butterflies and bees and other insects. Here's another great plant. This is a native fog fruit. That's an error. As a kid, we called it creeping Charlie, but there's a bunch of other things called creeping Charlie. This is a phylum, a little lawn weed that'll grow in lieu of pretty little white flowers. All another common name is and this is a cousin of Lantana. So it is also wonderful for pollinators. In the wild, it kind of grows in like wet areas, like in big cypress swamp, but this will grow lawns fairly well. It's a host plant for at least 2 flies. I think for the peacock, it's one of the white peacock and a buckeye. Okay. So we have our one of my favorite egg. You want some space for this in your yard. But so if anyone's serious about attracting wildlife, should have this in their yard, have the room for it. If you ever go on birding trips, like with Audubon, and the bird, this will have the most birds. What we think of as a fruit is an ecological. The wasp which pollinates it, and so figs have to constantly produce figs all the time, so it always has fruit. That's one of the reasons why it's such a great tree for your yard. So fruit almost all the time in it, and it's also a host plant for the ruddy dagger winged butterfly, and it's a fun tree for kids to climb. Back when kids used to play outside, you should, if you're, you could plant this in your yard. But again, you'll want some room. A lot of people say, oh, this will rip up your septic tank or this and that. Any big tree will do that. A gumbo limbo will do that. A live oak is not unique. It's just, it's got a bad reputation, which to me is undeserved. It's also a host plant to tons of different moths. And birds in your yard, then you want insects, caterpillars, because if you read Doug Tallamy's book, his first ones, Leaving Nature Behind or something like that, he talks about 96% of bird species feed their young insects. So if you want you should have things that have lots of insect population are better than as street trees. So it's a great tree and it's a dominant. And this is a good size to plant. This is going to grow really fast. So you don't need a 12-foot tree. This will become a 12-foot tree in like 3 years. All right, here we have another native. This is a rare native state endangered in the Keys. This, I knew it as Cordia globosa. One of the common names is bloodberry. It's now Veronia globosa. This is one that Roger Hammer changed the name from bloodberry to butterfly sage because it's such a great, and it's in the Boraginaceae, which is the same family as heliotrope and strongback, and that's another great plant family to attract insects in your yard. This is pollinators. This is endangered. So just be aware of that. If you live near a natural area, it's native to the Keys, it's not native to the mainland, and we can have natural areas or not. Keys policy was always no. With climate change, some people argument that that's no longer relevant. So, but I'm not giving you my people are saying. Now, I've never seen this brought in, but this is pretty cool. It's a native grass, not root fox bristlegrass. I know it as Ceteria. The genus is Ceteria parvifoliate. It's Ceteria in the inflorescence. Inflorescence is a flower cluster or a cluster of flowers. So this is a native grass. It grows in wetlands primarily, but it's also a pretty good lawn weed. And grasses are the #1 plant family in Florida with most diversity is within grasses. I've never seen or a raffle, I don't think. But it's no, it's a great grass. It's a clumping, so it's not rhizomatous, so it's not going to take over necessarily. It's probably a host plant to like 6 different butterflies that we're not aware of, because there are things like the grass skippers that use a ton of different species of grasses. And like I said, since grasses are dominant, we really should have more species in our yard, especially of the native grasses, because they were a major part of the structure of the plant communities that occur here. So if you have a nice weedy lawn, if you still have a lawn, you can fit this very easily in your lawn. You can mow it. If you have a little sunny pineland, this is great for that too, or wildflower. It's not going to get very big. It's only going to be about maybe knee height. The seeds will be eaten by things like doves. So if you have some nice open space, if you want to try and bring back like ground doves, which only occur in areas where they can get lots of seeds, this is a good one. So, all right, so we got beach dune sunflower, Helianthus debilis. This has beautiful yellow flowers, like its name would suggest. Grows in coastal uplands. This will grow very quickly, so this will become a big ground cover in about 3 months if you treat it right, and it needs full sun. This looks like a Rudbeckia, is it? Yeah, black-eyed Susan. So this is Rudbeckia hirta. Again, in the sunflower family, these are all great for attracting pollinators. Yellow flowers, doesn't get quite as spread out as the black-eyed Susan, as the beach dune sunflower, but it's a lovely wildflower. Plays in the big cypress. Here we have a native passion vine, Passiflora pallens. It's state endangered. Some butterflies will use this. Some of the heliconid species will use this. It's not their favorite. I know they like the corky stem best, but this grows on the edges of the hammocks and Dade and the Keys. So you'd want a fence line or you'd want some space. This gets a little bit bigger than a corky stem. It'll get maybe 20 feet long. And here we have the pine pink, the Bledia. It looks dead, but it's not. It just loses its leaves. It'll sprout a new soda bulb and new leaves in the summer. This grows on floating logs in the Fakahatchee. It also will grow along canal levees, along the banks. It's a state threatened orchid. It's a nice. Okay, Synobtusifolia. So this is a native Senna, short-lived. This species is the Senna obtusiform, and this, but it'll have seeds and you can grow it again. Host plant for several. The cloudless sulfur, the orange barred sulfur. So this is a great little plant. Doesn't get as big as the other native Sennas. Also, the old genus for those is cat. And here we have the fine plant down here is silkgrass, Pityopsis graminefolia. This is a perennial, big dense cluster. Pods because they last for weeks and weeks. But this is a great native wildflower, grows in pyroxylins. And here we have grass that's native Pan American. Yeah. But yeah, as Ricky was, the giant flower king. Looks like you got some Phyllanthus pentaphyllus. Nice. Eleonoris occurs at Nixon Smiley. Hopefully, we'll see some on Saturday. It's a grass that's found up peninsular, common in Miami, but it's native. I'm running short on time, but here we have a nice native. Oh no, that's Eupatorium. It's Coenophyllon villosum. It's a shrubby Eupatorium, and this grows in pyroxylins. Doesn't really come north of the redlands very much. So this is one of these tropical ones. Probably doesn't like the cold. This will put out lots of pretty white flowers, lots of pollinators, and it's a shrub. It's a perennial. Sky blue cluster vine, Jacomontia pentanthos. This is one of my favorite native vines. It's an endangered vine family with blue flowers about the size of a quarter. And this will grow on a fence perfectly. You will probably want more than one individual self-pollinating. Pollinating. That's my experience. If you want seeds. Here we have fiddlewoods. This is a small tree or a large shrub that grows on the edges of hammocks. Flowers that are white. There's male and female. The females will obviously produce fruit. Flowers are somewhat fragrant. It does get a tint caterpillar that'll totally denude it, but it should bounce back. It's a nice tree. And we have more wildflowers. We have seaside gentian and frostweed, and this is an Elliasper, a native violet, and we your yard. And if you have any questions about these last ones, you can contact me. We have now, are these for people to plant? Okay, so you have custom boxes that you can use. If you win, in order to win, you got to buy tickets. And again, you buy them from Susan in the back after the meeting or after the talk. All right, it's a great pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Eric King. And tonight's program, go ahead, is entitled The Ruins of Orchid Jungle. And Eric is the interpretive programs manager for Miami Eco Adventures, which is part of the now called Miami-Dade Parks, Recreation, and Open Spaces. Okay. And Eric's been an employee for Miami-Dade Parks for nearly 26 years. I don't believe that, really? Yeah. When did you start? When you were 12? Of that, he has spent 18 as an interpretive naturalist, developing and leading environmental programs from as far north as historic Arch Creek Park, south to Redlands Castillo Hammock Preserve and Nature Center. He has an extensive background in South Florida history and a love for storytelling. Please, both shown his presentations and published essays. Please give him a warm welcome, Eric.
I wouldn't clap just yet. All the secrets, every single one of them. I should. It's going to be a protest song.
And then this is the toggle slide.
Awesome. Okay, so bear with me here because I'm a mover when I do talks. I don't like to stand behind podiums. And I was like, oh, there's a microphone. I'm gonna have to talk into a microphone. But as you can see, I have a very loud voice. In fact, I had the loudest voice of any interpreter in the Miami Eco Adventures unit. So here, that's actually why I got a promotion. They're like, oh, because we can hear him. We can hear him. But yes, Steve, thank you very much for that introduction. It's really nice to see so many familiar faces, people that colleagues that I'm friends with, and new faces as well. So thank you so much for being here tonight to hear me out. And the reason I say hear me out is because I consider myself an advocate of Hattie Bower Hammock Preserve. Has anybody been to Hattie Bower Hammock Preserve here? Okay, then you might have a general idea of why Hattie Bower Hammock Preserve needs advocacy. Because the site has been closed now for 10 years, a decade this month. It has been closed for 10 years. And I have been doing programs there at that site, normally on site, there actually at Hattie Bower, since well, I'll just tell you how it happened. In 2019, after spending 7 years as the manager of Grenolds Park in North Miami Beach, I wanted to get out of park management of a metropolitan park. Grenolds is a beast, okay? It's a beautiful site with a lot of historic value, a lot of different ecosystems on site. It's a perfect place for me to manage from based on my background, but it's a culture of no when you're working for parks like that. I'm not wearing my parks uniforms. I'm just going rogue tonight. But I wanted to get back to doing what I love, which is educating, environmental education. My background is mostly South Florida history and Lepidoptera, actually. So I'm not good with scientific names of plants, just full disclosure right now, but I love plants and I'm very excited to see all those plants over there. It's great. But I want to get back to doing what I loved. And so in 2019, I became the manager of Castelo Hammock Nature Center and Preserve. And one of my marching orders when I first got there was to activate Hattie Bower. I had no idea what Hattie Bower was. I drove over there. It's very close to Castelo, as you know, if you've been there. And I was absolutely blown away by the resource that we have in that site, a site that is so packed full of historic and ecological value, and yet closed to the public for reasons that we will discuss. So I say the ruins of Orchid Jungle because that is for shock value, okay? It is pretty much lying in ruin at this point, but really this is the story of, gosh, it's a story of Orchid Jungle. We call it Hattie Bower Hammock Preserve. Let's just get right into it. Let's see if this thing works.
Downward. Not going.
Come on, Brian, come on.
I can move the slide forward.
Okay, yeah, slide please. So I already talked about who I am, but I just wanted to show you my happy place. Though I'm not really great with plant names and scientific names and that sort of thing, I'm an avid vegetable gardener and butterfly gardener. It is my happy place. That picture was taken during COVID when I was about 30 pounds lighter. I had more hair on my head and my eyes worked a lot better. A lot's changed since COVID, folks, and it's not the long COVID, okay? But most of you know me as an interpretive program supervisor. I am now the interpretive programs manager for Miami Eco Adventures, which means I oversee all the nature centers. Ooh, we're getting some ambience. Karina's busting out the ambience. Okay, let's see if it works now. Slide, please. Okay. Oh, I love doing this. Okay. I didn't realize this is an old presentation, so I just wanted to do this. So let's just do a quick quiz to see where your knowledge is of Hattie Bower very, very quickly. Okay, so Harriet Bower owned and operated the Orchid Jungle. Is that true or false? False. That's very, very good. She did not. She did not. What act allowed Harriet Bower to settle public land in South Dade? Was it the Homestead Exemption Act, the Judiciary Act of 1789, the Homestead Act of 1862, or the Embargo Act of 1807? Very good, very good. Okay, you all got it. However, self-date, and Jeff, you're just gonna have to stay, you can correct me on anything after the program, okay? But no hecklers tonight, okay? South Dade didn't open up for homesteading until 1898, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Thank you. All right, I got it. And then lastly, Hattie Bower Hammock Preserve is managed by the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program. Kind of. It's managed by a bunch of different entities, but we'll say that's true. Okay, go for it. So in order to talk about Orchid Jungle and what Orchid Jungle was, we have to talk about Harriet Bower, pioneer woman, fancy titles. Because, you know, this site really, it's three different things. First and foremost, it was Harriet Bower's homestead, or at least a portion of it. And then secondly, it was the Orchid Jungle. And then thirdly, it is now the Hattie Bower Hammock Preserve. Out of all of that, it spent the longest time as Orchid Jungle. It was only Harriet Bower's her homestead for a very short amount of time, from about 1906 to 1922. Okay, but she was the daughter of Effie and Hannah Bower, and one of the first women to settle land in South Dade, in the area that we call Modelo, in 1906. When you settled land, you got 160 acres of land to stake your little claim. And Harriet actually settled land pretty much across the street from where her parents had settled land previously, their 160 acres or whatever it might be. And while Harriet was there, she set up a very small cottage. I have these photos here. What I will tell you is the top one is labeled Hattie Bower's Hammock. It was taken by John Kunkel Small, who I assume you all know who that is, right? In 1916. And then the photo beneath it follows that photo in the succession, but it doesn't state whether or not that's Harriet Bower's cottage or anything like that. What we do know is that she grew crops. It was actually part of stipulations of having a homestead down here. And she grew avocados, oranges, and that sort of thing. Harriet had a little bit of a social life, and about half the year she would spend there at her residence, her homestead, and the other half of the year she would work in downtown Miami. How do we know this? How do we know these things about people? I'm always fascinated. Do you guys know how we would find out that kind of information? They did write letters. So a census is a great way. The 1910 census showed Harriet Bower's residence as being down here in Modelo, and it had her profession as a seamstress. Okay. We also know that when Harriet would make these trips, there would be these blurbs in local newspapers. They would say things like, Harriet Bower makes a 2-week trip to, that's my transatlantic voice, makes it like a 2-week trip to downtown Miami to spend some time with friends. And then when she would come back, there'd be another blurb about it. It was like social media talking about these people, I guess because there wasn't a lot of people. Okay.
Newspapers do that, Eric.
Is that what?
My hometown still has a column of where Alfredians have gone and come back.
Oh, that sounds horrible. That sounds terrifying. Okay. It's bad enough. That's true. That's true. In 1919, we know that Harriet Bower became a nurse. This was following suit of after her sister, who had become a nurse previously, and she decided that she was going to move to downtown Miami, or actually Brickell. I was just in Brickell last night. Terrifying. Another terrifying thing. But she decided to move to downtown Miami full time. And by this time, she actually owned her homestead, so she was able to sell off parcels of it. And I just want to put a little pin in that selling off parcels of it. While she was there, she founded the Holloman Park Sanatorium in the early 1920s. We'll get to the Fennell family in just a moment. She opened up a nursing home in the 1930s. And I'm saying this stuff, and she worked very closely with the Episcopal Church very late into her life. And I say this because Harriet just had a long history of wanting to help people. That was just kind of her thing. Okay. So even late into her age, she was working with the Episcopal Church, working with charities, and she wound up dying in 1961 at the age of 87. So she was actually, if you do the math, she was like in her late 20s when she settled that land in 1906. So really amazing. If go women, right? So I just want to bring it back up to that top bullet there because she sold 25 acres of her land to a man by the name of Lee Fennell in 1922. Slide, please. I don't even know why I'm holding this thing. It's actually kind of fun to hold, but no thanks. So that is, then we bring in the next character in our story. That is Lee the Wizard Fennell. They called him Wizard because he had the unique ability to grow orchids from seeds. Have any of you ever done that, Steve? No? Yeah. So this is something that he learned from his mother in their hometown of Cynthiana, Kentucky. How many of you have ever read the book The Orchid Thief? So you know about a little something that Susan Orlean talks about called orchid delirium. Orchid delirium. And these were affluent people who were typically in Europe who would hire people to cross the Atlantic to go to South and Central America and collect orchids and bring them back to these rich people in Europe. Many of the times when this would happen, those hunters would be on boats together and they would kind of be side-eyeing each other the entire time, okay? And in certain cases, these hunters would go and remove all the orchids they could from an area and then burn it down, okay? So that nobody else could get anything from there. Lee made many pilgrimages down into Central and South America himself, but this was much later on when you didn't burn down the forest after you took all the orchids out of it. But I like to always just note that about him. So he had a very successful cut flower and orchid growing business in Cynthiana, Kentucky. Cynthiana, Kentucky, cut flower and orchid growing business. I see a few of you are shaking your heads like, what? Yes. So it's fairly strange kind of thing. But he did, and he learned this from his mother. They would grow these orchids and these cut flowers originally in what they called rose pits, which are like these big holes in the ground that they would cover to keep them warm. Now, by the time Lee was becoming successful, he had actual greenhouses that were heated with these large boilers. At some point during Lee's history, he got sick with some sort of lung issue, okay? It wasn't tuberculosis, or as far as we know, it wasn't tuberculosis. And doctors would tell people with lung issues, go to South Florida, spend some time in South Florida. I'll tell you someone kind of famous in South Florida who did that very thing. His name was Edlund Scownon. He was the man who built the Coral Castle, or Ed's Place. It was called Coral Castle after he died to capitalize on, it's not coral, it's limestone, guys. Anyways, but he had tuberculosis and he came to South Florida. So the reason why Edlund Scownon came to South Florida was to get over this tuberculosis, except Edlund Scownon said that his tuberculosis was cured by the power of magnets. That's Edlund Scownon for you. So anyway, so at some point, Lee was sick. He came down here. He spent time in South Florida, and he kind of had a little bit of like a epiphany that he could grow these plants that he's needing to heat in Cynthiana, Kentucky, in a natural landscape. Ironically, when he came back, due to poor city planning, a creek was diverted, and it had flooded all of his greenhouses. And he lost thousands of dollars, 1920s money of cut flowers and orchids. So he decided to uproot his family. They loaded up 3 trucks with as many plants as they possibly could, and they trucked them down here to South Florida, where he met a woman by the name of Harriet Bauer, and he purchased, I say 25 acres. I'm pretty sure it was 40, but I saw that. I'm like, wait a second. It was about 40 acres of land from her in 1922. The very first thing that Lee Fennell did was he built a stone cottage out of limestone. This is, the limestone bedrock. And he built what's called the Fennell Cottage, and that's still there to this day. And we're going to see that in just a minute. He also built what's now called Grandfather's Greenhouse, also out of limestone. Post 1920s, you see a lot more limestone construction in the Redland area. Pre 1920s, you see a lot more wood shiplaps, so akin to William Anderson's Corner or some of those old houses out there. So you see a lot more limestone construction, probably because we were already destroying all the pine rockland out there. And you did sawmills of that area. So I don't think, I was just thinking about Haneland Mill, excuse me. So the next thing Lee did after building these structures is he started to carve out a trail into Harriet Bauer's hammock. And he started placing orchids in the trees to grow naturally. Lee Fennell, the folks that built Monkey Jungle, Charles Deering, James Deering, were all students of a book by Charles Torrey Simpson that was written in 1916 that the subject was integrating exotic plant life into a native landscape. So he wanted to create these pops of color along this trail. And people started to call it the Jungle Trail. So what we're going to kind of do at this point is I'm going to take you into Hattie Bauer Hammock Preserve. I'm going to show you what it looks like now, or a couple years ago when I made this presentation, and what it looked like during its heyday, hopefully in most cases, okay? So we're going to kind of walk through it as tourists. It works a lot better if you were all actually in Hattie Bauer Hammock Preserve, but I'm going to do my best to paint this picture. Okay, so Brian, if you don't mind.
All right, let's test this out.
Ooh.
Got
Oh, yeah, hey, okay.
it was
It was, oh, well, that certainly,
It's been a long day, guys.
that's okay. That's okay. So, yeah, so by the mid 1920s, there was kind of an established Fennell's Orchid Jungle operation going on. Now, we don't have like an exact date as to when it started being called Fennell's Orchid Jungle, but we do know that this is the age of the automobile. This is the 1920s. This is the age of the roadside attraction. I'm super honored to be here at the site of Parrot Jungle, right? Talking about the Orchid Jungle and Monkey Jungle I briefly mentioned. But Orchid Jungle was the first of the jungles. So also the coolest. No, I'm just kidding. This is limestone construction all out there too. So not only did he bring all these plants down from Cynthiana, Kentucky, but they started growing more plants and creating hybrids. So the Fennell family was really good at hybrids. They had about 13, 14 different hybrid orchids by like the 1940s. So they were really doing well. So there you go. They had 2,500 commercially viable plants in 30 different varieties. And because people were driving around, they were seeing this Fennell's Orchid Jungle. Lee Fennell himself was a teacher. He was ever the teacher, bringing people in. He wanted to teach them about these orchids. This became a fairly popular attraction during those days. They were astounded by seeing these colorful orchids just in a native landscape. So this caught the attention of a reporter. And that reporter went over to Fennell's Orchid Jungle and wrote an article on it. And they published it. It was 1925, 26. Wow. I don't know if I'm right or if that's right now. But circa mid 1920s. That's what we do in history. Circa this, right? This article is written by this reporter, and the next day, thousands of people show up at Orchid Jungle to see Fennell's Jungle Trail. And I always say interpretations like stand-up comedy because you wait for the punchline. That article was written by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. There you go. So you can see this is one of the iterations of the Orchid Jungle sign. This is the one of the pretty much the original one. You can see very blurry. It says where every lady gets an orchid, and that they held on to that theme until the day the place closed. Okay, which wasn't until the 1990s. So over 70 years, this place was operating there at that site by 4 generations of the Fennell family. Okay, I want to pop back up really quick. Not to that. Not to that. Though, you know, you can handsome guy. So that's another iteration. That would have been the last iteration of the Orchid Jungle sign. It's a hammered metal orchid. And Jeff and I have gotten into conversations about fact versus myth when it comes to history. And I'm a big fan of myth integrated into history, but there is a myth that that hammered orchid sign still exists somewhere. So here's your 4 generations of Fennell. This is to help me just as much as it is to help you because there's a lot of Thomas Fennells. So you had Lee Fennell, who died in 1941, not before he harvested some corrugated glass from the Richmond Naval Base, by the way, at the zoo, or what would become the zoo, which is that glass is at Orchid Jungle. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Married to Mary Fennell, who died in 1946. The operation was taken over by Thomas Fennell Sr. And his wife, Dorothy Fennell, who had Thomas Jr., probably the most famous of the Fennell, and some of you might have actually known him, and Trudy Fennell, and then Thomas III, Anita, and Trudy Lynn, who all had children themselves. But that's pretty much, that was the last line before Orchid Jungle actually closed. I bring up Thomas Sr., and you see there's a date there, 1977. So I mentioned briefly how the Fennell family was creating hybrids. And one of their biggest claims to fame was a hybrid dendrobium called Dendrobium Dorothy Fennell. And see, I love it. When I do the tour, I wait to show you this incredible orchid that she's sitting in front of right there. That was 5 feet tall, 7 feet wide, and had thousands of blooms. When it finally bloomed, it took 11 years for that orchid to grow to that size and to finally bloom. And it was created by Thomas Sr. Unfortunately, he never got to see it bloom because he died in 1977, shortly before it did bloom. It only bloomed a couple years after that. So very unfortunate. But I like to talk about Tom Jr. as well. Again, if you've read The Orchid Jungle, there's about 4 chapters dedicated to Orchid Thief, excuse me. If you've read The Orchid Thief, there's about 4 chapters dedicated to the Orchid Jungle. And she talks about Thomas Jr. in there as the tallest, most straight-backed man she had ever met. And you'll see why. So let's get into the buildings. So this is the Fennell Cottage, built in 1922. It was square in construction, built with that lytic limestone that was quarried directly from the ground. Nice 5V crimp roof if you're into construction, a very old type of roof there. In the 1960s, there was an addition that was added on that you can kind of see. But one of the things you'll notice is that even in these photos that were taken a couple years ago, Orchid Jungle is being reclaimed by nature. Everything's being reclaimed. But this would have been the oldest structure on the property that Lee Fennell, Mary, and Tom Sr. would have started living in when they first started living there. And then later on, groundskeepers, and then eventually in the 90s, a guy named Snake Boy used to live in there. He had snakes. Okay. We talk about the entrance sign. If you're driving down Newton Road, 157th Avenue, you can still see this pylon of limestone stacked on top of it, still standing there. It's still sitting there. And this would have been the original Orchid Jungle sign where it was located. Everything is so pixelated, but this is here. And you're seeing the different eras of this sign. You saw the first one that looked like it had an old Cadillac in front of it, said every lady gets an orchid. This would have been the second iteration. You can kind of get, a general timeline because of that car that's parked right there in front of it. That's one of those cars, if you run into the back of it, it explodes. By this time, they not only had that sign, but they had built this huge gatehouse in the front of the property that you would walk through with a gift shop, and that would take you on to the into the historic core or the jungle trail, where you could still experience the jungle trail as Lee Fennell intended it. Later on in the 80s, that trail wasn't being used as much anymore, and instead you had these giant tents that were built out in the field spaces, and that's where people would peruse their orchids. So the theme park aspect of it was kind of whittling away a little bit. And located inside that entrance sign is still the crank that had a wire attached to it that went up that beam, hung down, and that wooden orchid hung from it, and it could turn. Yeah. Now I mentioned the main entrance in the gift shop. Even now, that pergola has collapsed even more. And you can kind of get a sense of what happened to the orchid jungle or Hattie Bower Hammock Preserve. This pergola is not even original. That pergola was installed there after Hurricane Andrew to build a temporary roof so that they could get Orchid Jungle reopened as quickly as possible. Adjacent to the pergola is the remnants of the gift shop, which you can see it in its heyday here. And now it's just an empty shell there. And that is actually collapsed even more since these photos were taken. One of the most beautiful things about doing the tour there is having people come in that had gone to the orchid jungle while it was open. And I once had a lady who, knowing that she was going to see this, she was in shock when she did see it. She brought a little vial of lavender perfume that she had bought from that very gift shop. She still had it to this day. Yeah, there's all sorts of remnants of like old kiosk, old like information stands, all kind of burned out. This particular information stand is now completely collapsed. It's pretty much gone. And you can see right in front of it is one of those devil's trees. And I bring that up for a specific reason. I'm gonna jump back to that in a moment. The old offices, there's still filing cabinets, telephones, desk, all sorts of stuff. Again, nature reclaiming it, all these grasses and everything kind of pouring out of it. And then near the offices, all over the ground, is this really, really thick glass. It would call corrugated glass. It's a thick glass that has a chicken wire integrated into it. And that glass was harvested from the Richmond Naval Base by Lee Fennell, and he used it on many of the structures there. I bring up the Devil's Tree there because Eel is doing tremendous work. Is it still called Eel? I don't know, guys. Okay, but they're doing tremendous work out there restoring the hammock. So this is an invasive exotic, and they are treating them. So they're these incredibly tall, narrow trees that there's by the hundreds there, and they're treating those most likely with like a garland or something along those lines. They're all gone now. They're all dying. Okay. Not only have they treated all these devil's trees, but they've gone through and they have treated the majority of the aroid vines that have been climbing their way up into the canopy. And now those vines are peeling off the trees, or they have been peeling off of the trees, dying. And what's happening now is that the canopy is opening and sunlight is reaching the bottom. And all those dormant native trees that have been sitting there waiting for their chance, like a paradise tree, are all now starting to get that burst of light that they've so wished for all this time. And they're all going shooting up to the top of the hammock. And I'm always amazed by how quickly paradise trees grow once they get enough sunlight. It's just an incredible thing to watch. I mean, just in the course of months, you can have a tree that seems it's been dormant for years. All of a sudden, it's popping up. So they're doing great work out there. They've also pushed back a large portion of a disturbed area where there was a lot of not Cecropia, the say Sigonium, and then there's the octopus. What was that? Cecropia. Was it Cecropia? Scheffler. Thank you. There we go. I'm saying Cecropia because I'm just imagining these white trees sticking out of the hammocks in Brazil. But yeah, Scheffler. They pushed all those back, and now they've replanted that whole area with Colubrina, native stoppers, and that sort of thing. And all those are really taking over that little area now. So it's incredible work. One of my favorite structures on the property is the labs that are in ruin, of course. And when these were built in the 1970s, there's your tall, straight back man right there, Tom Fennell Jr. In his white lab coat working on the orchids. And remember, this was a theme park, folks. You know, this was an orchid theme park. So the idea was that you would walk along this little corridor here, and there'd be these large windows in the labs, and you could see these folks working on the orchids. You could see the process of growing orchids just right behind a piece of glass. And that's kind of how it would look over that time. Now that it's a completely empty shell, though there are still some old desks and some sorting tables for the orchids in there. An old bathroom, really creepy if you ever walk in there. Definitely recommend it. Whenever I go there, I always take my walking stick and tap on the wall just in case there's anybody in there. Like, I'm here. And I mentioned the labs being one of my favorite structures. This is my favorite structure on the entire property. These are a little out of order. Normally, we would walk through as if you were a tourist going through there. But this is called the Vanda House. And the Vanda House is a series of concrete shelves on either side of you, so they flank you, where they would display orchids. And this is one of the older structures on the property that they were using as a greenhouse before they moved on to all the large greenhouses in the fields there. This is one of those areas whenever I go through there with a group, someone finds something, whether it's a little plant identifier tab or a piece of fencing or this large industrial fan that's pictured there. But one of my dreams was to actually get a photo of the Vanda House during operations, actual operation. And there's surprisingly few photos of Orchid Jungle online. So I didn't have one, and there it is right there. I did get one eventually until 4 photo albums were donated to us by the Fennell family, most of which were taken after Hurricane Andrew. It's a lot of destruction photos, but intermingled in that are some really amazing photos of the structures that I did not have already. Later on, it's described that they used the Vanda House to grow bromeliads more than anything, or display bromeliads more than anything. And the Fennells would say that, well, if you can't grow orchids, you can have a bromeliad. Another amazing structure on the property is Grandfather's Greenhouse. This was built in 1923, right after the Fennell Cottage. Again, pretty much anytime you see something with a limestone construction, it's probably original there. But these walls that you see, it's kind of hard to describe, but they're about yay tall. And it has this beautiful gabled roof. There's no covering on it anymore. And then coming out of the roof, you can almost see it right here, is another gable. It's one of the most beautiful structures, and it's pushed up against the Vanda House so closely that for a long time, we didn't even know how to get into it until Eel went through there and was removing all those exotics. And there's a very clear path that runs behind the Vanda House into it now. Inside, there are a bunch of plant tables that are sitting upon limestone pylons again. The photo of Lee Fennell, let me see if I can do this really quick. Probably not. Yeah, let's see, I'm so slow here. There we go. There I am again. Okay. He's inside the grandfather's greenhouse in this photo.
I can bring it forward.
Oh, thanks. Yes, appreciate you. Except for all my transitions, all my fancy transitions. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So built in 1923. Whoa. Yeah. You go back a couple slides. There we go. So another really amazing feature on the trail there is grandfather's oak that's believed to be 500 years old. And I really feel like we give the number 500 to a lot of trees. Oh yeah, it's 500 years old. And I mean, maybe. I don't really know if we have a way of really knowing. But one of the things I do want to point out, a couple of things I want to point out is how the canopy of this live oak is one thing, but its roots cascading over the limestone bedrock in the middle of this hammock, intertwining with the roots of other trees. It's really something to behold. And we could probably talk about mycorrhizal networks and all that stuff all we want here. It's a lot of fun to talk about that stuff, but I always like to think about all these trees communicating with or grandfather's oak communicating with all these trees by these really slow electrical signals, right? But about halfway up that tree is a large basket right here, also very hard to see. And this is where the Fennell family would display orchids, or they would stick like a pothos or something in, which is half the reason we're in the trouble that we're in now over there. They started calling everything grandfather's this, grandfather's that after Lee Fennell passed away. This tree was also photographed by John Kunkel Small in 1916. We believe if you look at the photo and look at the tree, they look almost identical. The difference being is that in the photo that John Kunkel Small took, the tree is just covered in bromeliads and native orchids, which is just a sight to behold. And this is what you pretty much would have experienced there had you gone there in its heyday. These fashionable folks standing in the middle of the trail with all this color popping out all over the place. There's a lot of those plants that are still there, like Clerodendron. There's a lot of I mean, that's everywhere, it just pops up everywhere. But as far as orchids go, oh, there's the photo of grandfather's oak right there. But as far as orchids go, you'll see some monk orchid. And that's pretty much it. But the goal, the goal is to restore this ecosystem there, which is a rockland hammock. And some of you may know this, but I'll just say it anyway. Rockland hammocks are a globally imperiled ecosystem. Let me see if that's the next slide. Hey, there we go. So rockland hammocks are a globally imperiled ecosystem that are found along the Miami Rock Ridge, which is that half-moon shaped elevation of limestone that goes from about North Miami Beach to Mahogany Hammock down in the Everglades. So you can have elevations of 10 feet above sea level, 15 feet above sea level, and in some cases, supposedly 19 feet above sea level, which the Fennell family claimed that they have a 19 feet above sea level area in their hammock there. But they're commonly bordered by pine rocklands, so they're kind of like these sister ecosystems, except that hammocks like to devour pine rocklands. They like to eat them. All those ecotone plants sending seeds out and things growing and not being burned. And next thing you know, you have hammock everywhere. You wind up with something like Castello hammock that was once surrounded by pine rockland, and even a pine rockland little trail right smack in the middle of what would be Ross hammock and Castello hammock that's now completely filled in with just large canopy trees like strangler fig. But we love strangler figs, don't we? Gumbalimbos, wild tamarins, paradise trees, false mastics, et cetera, et cetera. And they contain these large solution holes because this is elevated limestone. Limestone's incredibly brittle. It is controlled by nature's architect, which is who's nature's architect?
Gators.
Gators? Water. Water is nature's architect. And so water has this way of creating these channels, these holes, sinkholes, that sort of thing, these karst environments within these large ecosystems like this that are along that Miami rock ridge. Within those solution holes, you have this microclimate, right? That allows for some of the rarest, most endangered ferns to grow, like the Florida bristle fern grows inside these solution holes because of that little microclimate that's in there, and we're trying to protect these little ferns. I was told, and this is totally anecdotal, but I was told that Hattie Bower hammock is one of the largest concentrations of native and exotic ferns in pretty much South Florida. So you can ask James Duncan about that. And these solution holes, oh, you know what? I think there we go. So these solution holes, they fill up with water. We get these heavy downpours of rain, and those solution holes aren't filling up with water from above. They're filling up with water from below because the water table is rising, and it's coming through that porous limestone rock. And then that water will actually sit in those solution holes for an extended period of time and slowly seep back out into the forest. So it's like these big water bombs there. But you can imagine that if you were, if you were a prehistoric animal or a human being living in this area thousands of years ago, thousands upon thousands of years ago, these were great sources of fresh water, sort of like a cenote in the Yucatan. And so they often they can be archaeological sites. Now, again, I like to tell stories that are kind of half historic and half myth. Sorry. But there's this great story about Monkey Jungle, another jungle, and them excavating a solution hole there and finding the bones of dire wolves and saber-toothed cats and things like that, all mixed in with the rock and the mud. The Cutler fossil site is a great example of that, where not only did they find the bones of prehistoric animals, but they also found the bones of people from 7,000 years ago. They found the hearth where people would cook underneath, after pulling out about 2 meters, 6 feet of mud from that particular solution hole. And so here at Hattie Bower, there is a very large solution hole right on the trail. And it being a theme park, you have to put a railing around something that's dangerous. And within that solution hole, if you actually look to the back of it, there is concrete that's kind of like poured down on the backside of the solution hole. And then on the surface, there's a fallen tree right there, just behind there, that poured concrete is. That fallen tree is actually fake. That tree was placed there and built by Tom Fennell Jr. To hide pump equipment that they would use to create a waterfall inside that solution hole. So a lot of the ferns that you find inside that solution hole are actually exotic ferns. There's a lot of bromeliads growing in there as well, and a lot of stuff placed there by the Fennell family to create that jungle aesthetic. There is a photo taken by John Kunkel Small of a lime sink at Hattie Bower Hammock at the top there. Oh, okay. Who's that handsome gentleman? So just some like a little tying up loose ends here. So there's some fairly interesting stuff at Hattie Bower as well. If you're walking down the trail, just go back to this one, and you see a 4x4 post with a 45-degree angle cut into it. Those posts were placed there by the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program as part of a trail system. However, kind of strewn about throughout the hammock, there we go, are these placards on a galvanized pipe that were placed there by the Fennell family, describing whatever it is you might see. What's really interesting about these pipes is that they're everywhere. And so it helps you, it makes you imagine what it is they could have been featuring. Because if you look at it now, it's just nature. There's nothing really there, nothing there, okay? There's a large tree called a colocordifolia tree there. It has these massive leaves that look like gigantic cecropia leaves, actually, believe it or not, that is growing there. And apparently the Fennell family grew that tree from seed. It grew, it fell, it kept on going, and it's still huge. And those are the leaves of it at the top there. And then finally, Mount Dade, which is what I'm standing on in that picture. That picture is really staged to make it look like it's higher than it really is. But the Fennell family claimed that that's 19 feet above sea level at that point. They call it Mount Dade. I like to tell people, oh, you feel the air, it's getting thinner up here. And their claim was that that is the highest point above sea level south of Coconut Grove. So what happened, right? So we're getting to, and how much time do I have, Brian? I need to.
It's 8:45. I'm not sure what time are we.
Yeah, 5 more minutes.
Oh, okay. I gotta go then. Okay, so what happened to Orchid Jungle? Like we're at that point. We want to know what happened, right? Well, even by the 1980s, Orchid Jungle was suffering a decline in popularity. And I'm talking specifically about the Jungle Trail, the theme park aspect of it. Now think about it. The mouse came to town, right? And once you had these huge established theme parks that hold their glitz and glamour, the roadside attraction wasn't as exciting anymore. But they are still doing plenty well financially because they had those big old tents out there. But then in 1992, I like to call this the South Dade Redland Homestead story. You have BH, era BH, and then you had era AH, which is before Hurricane Andrew and after Hurricane Andrew. So Hurricane Andrew hits South Dade, and Orchid Jungle is completely destroyed. Completely destroyed. You could see the just the twigs and that large sign outside next to the gatehouse right there. But the Fennell family wanted to reopen again, and so they did. They reopened in 1993 with a very large harvest festival, and then they closed again in 1994. I don't know why I'm laughing. That just seemed like really mean. But it's because, or at least we assume, that Thomas Jr. and Trudy Fennell won the Florida lottery in 1994. They won $6.7 million, and the Orchid Jungle closed. Most of that money went to charities, and Tom Fennell said he wanted to travel. But if you remember that slide with the family on it, Tom Fennell Jr. actually died 4 years later in 1998. So they closed and they rejected a lot of offers from different developers, but they accepted the one from Miami-Dade County who purchased it with a grant from the Florida Communities Lands Trust and the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program. Okay, boom, boom, boom. So now we have 15 acres that was purchased in 1998. And I have all the names of the different entities there. And then Orchid Jungle gets listed as a state historic site in 1999, actually the Miami-Dade County Historic Site. See what happens when I have to do 5 minutes, guys? And it's open as a passive park. Now, I want to say something. Passive park is very dangerous for a site that has all these historic structures on it, okay? Because very quickly, you started having vandalism happening there. I actually have some other photos, they're not part of this presentation, of vandalism starting there. Then in 2016, January of 2016, and then again in February of 2016, there are acts of arson at the Orchid Jungle or Hattie Bower Hammock Preserve that destroy the entire gatehouse, and then later on the office buildings behind it. So 10 years this month that happened. And the site completely closes at that point. It's unsafe. The only way that you can access Hattie Bower Hammock Preserve is there's two ways. One, you can volunteer with EEL, or two, you can go on a tour with me. Those are the only two ways. You should come on a tour with me. Okay. So what's next? Okay, so obviously nature is reclaiming the site. There's these EEL volunteer work days. We did have a historic structures report done in 2020. Harley and I actually got to go into the Fennell Cottage for the first time while that was all going on. And part of the recommendations from that historic structures report was the restoration of the Fennell Cottage, the preservation of grandfather's greenhouse, the Vanda House, and the sign. They recommended removing the gatehouse, removing the office buildings. But those other structures, they said that, okay, they can be saved. They can be saved. And that's pretty much where it ended. That's pretty much where it ended. And now here, you all know that I work for Miami-Dade County. Here's where I kind of like cover my logos if I'm on the tour. EEL has approached the Dade Heritage Trust. And the Dade Heritage Trust has gotten a grant to create a master plan that they would develop to eventually restore the buildings at Hattie Bower Hammock. The Parks Department's not happy about this. Why? I don't know. I describe it as someone being dumped by their girlfriend and all of a sudden they love their girlfriend again. Okay, it's that kind of thing. But this is what we're trying to do now. And when it comes to me, let me just, yeah, okay, good. I'll end it here. I talk about this site. I don't know if you could tell this, I love this site. I adore it. It's a very special place to me because it deserves recognition. It deserves to be preserved. It's a place that has so much historic value. This family, this one family, helped this place, created something over 70 years, longer than Hattie Bower was ever there. Okay? And yet we call it Hattie Bower Hammock Preserve. And I know it's because of the historic stuff. Okay, I get it. But it deserves that recognition. So when I became the interpretive programs manager for Miami Eco Adventures, I went into an administrative role again. The very thing I told you at the beginning I did not want to do because of the culture of no. But here I am. But the one tour, the one talk I will always continue to do is one that advocates for the preservation of this important, special place. And now you all are part of it. So good luck. Thank you all so very much. Every lady gets an orchid. There you go. Yes.
FCT helps to buy the site.
Yes.
When you fill out an FCT application, you promise stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the state is perfectly capable of reclaiming their grant money if you don't do.
That is correct. Yes.
So what happened there?
There's a lot of back and forth debate, but you are correct. Part of the FCT agreement is that Hattie Bower Hammock would be open to the public. The way that the county right now is getting away with that is by offering guided tours of the site. So it's honestly, it's really unsafe to be in there. It really is. And that's the honest truth. I would take as many people as they want. I think it should be open. And EEL is working towards that. They really are. But the Parks Department manages the buildings. And if you have collapsed buildings that could slice your leg open just by walking by one of them, it's unsafe. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg kind of thing right now. But you are correct. Part of the agreement is that it's open to the public. And the way that we're doing that is through these tours. Can they revoke the grant? Yes, they can. I don't know where that's at, but I know there's have been talks. Yeah.
Second question. Okay, we're now part of your advocacy.
Yes.
What can the people in this room do to further
Right.
the preservation and the eventual opening of Canada?
Well, you can make a stink, but don't use my name when you do, for one. No, but seriously, I think it comes down to the support of the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program and the efforts that they are making because they are on the right track. What they're doing with DHT, Data Heritage Trust, is really important right now. Gosh, I'm realizing this is being done online, but this is the truth, guys. I mean, I'm not trying to poo-poo on anything, but what they're doing with them is really important right now because it's a plan. It's a way to move forward. So supporting them, supporting their volunteer efforts, you should see the restoration work that they've done over there in the hammock itself. They are opening up areas in that hammock that have not been traversed in many, many years, and we are finding new stuff. There's a giant pond in the shape of a heart that they've just uncovered there. Okay, so really, I think it comes down to supporting those efforts. My role here is to make you all aware of it so that you can be aware of it and then share that and move that along.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
It's still food, grab a sandwich. We'll do the raffle in about 5 or 10 minutes. You can buy tickets from Susan in the back.
Hi.